I knew what the email said before I opened it. I'd seen enough of them by then. Some began with, "Thank you for your interest." Others told me how impressed they'd been with my experience. A few assured me that the decision had been difficult. Different companies, different words, same message, not you. And after you've received enough of those emails, something strange starts to happen. You stop reading them as decisions. You start reading them as descriptions of yourself. Some battles don't look dramatic from the outside. Mine didn't. It was fought quietly, somewhere between another application, another rejection, and the hope that eventually one door would open. Six months earlier, I wasn't worried. I'd spent more than 15 years building my career. I'd managed teams, solved difficult problems, survived reorganizations that swallowed entire departments. So when my position disappeared during another round of restructuring, I was disappointed. But frightened? Not really. I thought I'd probably be working again within a few weeks, maybe 2 months, 3 at the absolute worst. I had no idea how long 3 months could feel when you're counting them one application at a time. At first, I treated unemployment like another project. Update the resume, contact recruiters, set job alerts, apply, follow up, repeat. I created spreadsheets, tracked applications, customized cover letters. Some mornings I'd applied for 3 jobs before breakfast. I wasn't sitting around waiting for something to happen. I was doing everything people tell you to do. The first few rejections barely bothered me. I understood hiring. I'd hired people myself. Not every application becomes an interview. Not every interview becomes an offer. Sometimes you have 5 excellent candidates and 1 vacancy. I knew that, at least intellectually, because knowing something and living through it are 2 very different things. Then came the part nobody had warned me about. Other people's good news. I'd opened LinkedIn and there it was. Someone I'd worked with years ago had started a new position. Someone else had been promoted. Another person was thrilled to announce their next chapter. I'd press like. Sometimes I'd write, "Congratulations, well deserved," and I meant it. That's what made the feeling so difficult to explain. I really was happy for them. But underneath that happiness was this little ache. This question I didn't particularly like admitting was there. God, when is it going to be my turn? Then I'd close the app and feel guilty for even thinking it. Their success hadn't taken anything away from me. Their new job wasn't the reason I didn't have one. I didn't want what belonged to them. I just wanted to know there was something for me too. And when you've been waiting long enough, someone else's arrival can remind you just how long you've been standing still. If you've ever lived through a season like this, then you know how quietly rejection can change the way you see yourself. If my story feels familiar, subscribe to Lantern 7. This is a place for honest stories about faith, struggle, and finding the strength to keep going. So I kept applying. Some applications disappeared into silence. Some produced automated rejection emails within days. A few became interviews. And honestly, sometimes those were worse, because an application allows you to remain detached. An interview gives you hope. Then one Tuesday morning, a company I genuinely admired contacted me. They wanted an interview, not a recruiter screening, a real interview with the hiring team. And when I read the job description, I couldn't believe how closely it matched my experience. For the first time in months, I felt something I'd been trying very hard not to feel: excitement. I prepared for 3 days. I researched the company, read the job description until I practically knew it by heart, prepared examples for every competency I thought they might ask about. I practiced answering questions without sounding rehearsed, then practiced again, because now I sounded too rehearsed. And somewhere between preparing examples and researching the leadership team, I started imagining things I knew I shouldn't. The commute, my first week, what I'd wear, how it would feel to finally update LinkedIn myself. I had to stop myself. Derek, don't get ahead of yourself. First, get through the interview. That morning, I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual, not because of my tie. Somewhere during those months of rejection, interviews had stopped feeling like conversations. They had started feeling like examinations of my worth. And then I remembered something I'd once told nervous candidates when I sat on the other side of the table. You already earned the interview. Now just have the conversation. So that's what I tried to do. And the conversation went well. Really well. One interviewer laughed at something I said. Another leaned forward when I explained how I'd rescued a difficult project at my previous company. The hiring manager asked a follow-up question, then another. Not because my answer was unclear. She genuinely wanted to know more. At the end, she stayed behind for several minutes after everyone else left. We talked about the team, the challenges they were facing, what my first 90 days might look like. When I finally walked toward that elevator, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in months: confidence. On the drive home, I replayed everything. That answer was strong. They liked the project example. The hiring manager asked about my availability. We talked about my first 90 days. For once, I wasn't trying to convince myself that an average interview had gone well. It had gone well, and I knew it. Before I even got home, I called my family. I tried to sound measured, tried not to get carried away. I told them the interview had gone well, very well actually, and then I said the sentence unemployed people learn to be careful with. I think this might be the one. The moment I said it aloud, the possibility became more real. Later that evening, a friend called to ask how it went. I laughed. Man, I think I got this one. It wasn't arrogance, it was relief. After months of having nothing certain to tell people, it felt good to finally have some good news, even if the good news hadn't officially happened yet. And that is what made what came next hurt so much more. They told me I'd hear something by Friday. Friday morning passed. Nothing. I wasn't worried. It was early. Lunch passed. Nothing. 3 o'clock. Nothing. Every notification made me reach for my phone. Bank alert. News alert. Message from a friend. Anything except the message I was waiting for. Five o'clock came, then 6. I told myself hiring decisions run late, people get busy, approvals get delayed. I knew all the explanations. I'd used them myself. Then Monday came. Still nothing. And now the confidence I'd felt leaving that building started changing shape. Had I misunderstood them? Was the manager simply being polite? Maybe that answer wasn't as strong as I'd thought. Maybe I talked too much. Maybe I hadn't talked enough. That's another thing nobody tells you about waiting. Waiting can rewrite your memories. By Tuesday evening, I'd checked my email more times than I wanted to admit. Nothing. Then I opened LinkedIn. The company had posted that afternoon. Employees were commenting. People were responding. Life inside that company was clearly moving along just fine. And I sat there thinking, how is everybody carrying on normally while I'm still waiting for one email? I knew that wasn't entirely fair. The person managing their social media probably had absolutely nothing to do with recruitment, but disappointment isn't always rational. After enough silence, silence begins to feel like an answer. What I didn't know at the time was what had happened after I left that interview. I only learned this months later. After I walked out, the panel talked about me for 23 minutes. They liked me. A lot. Two of the interviewers thought I was the strongest communicator they'd met. The hiring manager believed I'd fit the team almost immediately. I hadn't imagined the connection. I hadn't misread the room. I had interviewed well. But another candidate interviewed the following day. His experience was similar to mine. There was one difference. For 4 years, he'd worked extensively with a particular system the company was planning to implement. I'd never used it. That was it. Not intelligence, not personality, not whether I deserved to work. One piece of experience, one immediate business need, one decision. I came second. But there's no trophy for second place in a job interview, and companies rarely send you an email saying, "You were excellent. Someone else simply matched one requirement slightly better." To them, it was a difficult hiring decision. To me, sitting at home without any of that information, it felt personal. The email arrived Wednesday morning. I opened it. "Thank you. Strong candidate, difficult decision, moving forward with another applicant." There it was, another carefully worded no, except this one hurt differently, because this time, I'd believed. And worse, I told people I believed. Now I had to tell everybody, the family I'd called from the car, the friend I'd told, "I think I got this one." I knew they weren't going to judge me. That wasn't the problem, but saying, I didn't get it, felt like experiencing the rejection all over again. That morning, something in me cracked. Maybe 15 years of experience didn't matter anymore. Maybe I'd been unemployed too long. Maybe employers saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. Maybe I was asking for too much. Maybe I wasn't as good as I thought I was. Maybe everybody else really was moving forward. And I wasn't. Rejection has a strange way of turning one company's decision into a verdict on your entire life. I prayed that morning. And I'm not going to pretend it was some beautiful prayer. It wasn't. I was tired. I didn't have many words left. I just told God the truth. "Lord, I don't know what else to do." I asked him to help me keep going, because right then, I wasn't sure how many more disappointments I could take. And then I asked him for something else. Direction. If there was something I needed to change, show me. If I needed to wait, give me the strength to wait. And if the door I kept asking him to open wasn't the right door, help me trust him enough to accept that too. I changed my resume again, then changed it back, rewrote my summary, removed 2 lines, added them again, changed the formatting. At some point, improving my resume had stopped being strategy. It had become an attempt to fix whatever I thought was wrong with me. A few days later, I called an old colleague named Vincent. I wasn't looking for encouragement. I didn't want him telling me everything would magically work out. I wanted criticism. I asked him to look at my resume and tell me what was wrong. Vincent did something more useful. He told me the resume wasn't the problem, but sometimes the way I talked about myself was. Vincent had interviewed me for an internal position years earlier, and he remembered something I'd forgotten. When I became nervous, I started proving. I listed accomplishments, responsibilities, years, projects, everything I'd ever done. But sometimes I forgot to explain the simplest thing. What problem did you solve? What did you actually do? Why did it matter? I'd spent months trying to convince employers that I was impressive. Maybe I needed to make it easier for them to understand how I could help. So, I changed my approach. Not my personality, not my entire career, my approach. I stopped memorizing perfect answers. I started telling clearer stories. What was the problem? What did I do? What changed because I was there? And for the first time in months, job hunting became something I could learn from, instead of something being done to me. And then, I got rejected again, because life doesn't always reward a new mindset by Friday. There was no magical phone call the next morning, no dramatic breakthrough, no perfect opportunity appearing because I'd prayed the right prayer. The rejection still hurt, but this time, I didn't spend the evening dismantling myself. I reviewed the interview, wrote down what I could improve. Then I applied for another position. Meanwhile, life kept happening. Bills didn't care that I was between opportunities. Groceries still cost money. Insurance still came due. Friends still asked how the job search was going, and I became very good at saying, "Still looking, something will come." Some days I believed it, some days I didn't, but I kept moving, I kept applying, and I kept praying, because when I couldn't see what was ahead, I needed to keep trusting that God could. Some days, that trust came easily. Other days, it was the only thing keeping me from giving up. Three weeks later, a recruiter called about a position I almost ignored. The title wasn't exactly what I'd been searching for. The company was smaller. The role looked different from the career path I'd pictured. Months earlier, I probably would have dismissed it. It didn't look like what I'd been asking God for. But somewhere during that season, I had started learning something. God's answer doesn't always arrive looking like the answer you imagined. And something Vincent had told me stayed in my head too. Stop asking whether the job matches the picture you've created. Ask whether the work matches what you're actually good at. So I took the interview. This interview felt different. Not because the interviewers were nicer, because I was different. When they asked about a difficult project, I didn't give them 6 accomplishments. I told them one story, the problem, the pressure, the mistake my team almost made, the decision I took, the result. Then I stopped talking. One interviewer looked at the other and nodded. I noticed, but this time I didn't build an entire future around a nod. I walked out of that building knowing I'd prepared. I'd shown up. I'd told the truth about what I could do. The rest wasn't my decision. I couldn't control what happened in that room after I left. I couldn't control who else interviewed. I couldn't control what experience another candidate might have. I'd spent months trying to control outcomes I had never actually controlled. So this time, I did what was in my hands to do, and I left the rest with God. Strangely, that felt like getting part of my life back. Two days later, the hiring manager called. I braced myself. Then she started talking about salary. For a second, I genuinely didn't understand what was happening. She was offering me the job, not the job I'd spent 6 months imagining. A different one. At a company I hadn't originally considered, doing work that, as it turned out, suited me remarkably well. When the call ended, I didn't shout. I didn't run around the house. I sat down, same kitchen, same table, same laptop. For months, that table had been where I measured everything I thought was wrong with my life. And now, I just sat there and breathed. Then I thanked God. I thanked Him for bringing me through those months when I wasn't sure how things would turn out. I thanked Him for giving me the strength to keep going when I wanted to give up. And I thanked Him for this new opportunity. Not because the journey had been easy, but because God had been faithful through all of it.
Months later, I learned what had happened with that first company. I had been their second choice. One requirement had separated me from the person they hired. That was all. And I thought about how many nights I'd spent trying to discover what was fundamentally wrong with me. There had been nothing fundamentally wrong with me. I lost a competition I hadn't even known was close.
That's why I look at rejection differently now. Rejection can give you information. Sometimes you need more experience. Sometimes your resume needs work. Sometimes you interview badly. Sometimes you really do need to change your approach. But rejection cannot tell you what you're worth. I'd confused an outcome with an identity. Not getting the job meant exactly that. I didn't get that job. It didn't mean I'd never work again. It didn't mean 15 years of experience had disappeared. And it certainly didn't mean God had forgotten me. The next time I saw somebody announce a new job on LinkedIn, something felt different. I remembered the version of myself who used to press like, then quietly wonder when my turn would come. Because somewhere, someone else was doing that now. Maybe even looking at my announcement. Happy for me, while quietly asking, God, when is it going to be my turn? If that's you, I understand. Maybe you've applied so many times you've stopped counting. Maybe you thought the last interview was the one. Maybe they promised to call and never did. Maybe you're watching people celebrate the very thing you've been praying and working for, and you're happy for them. But it still hurts. Both things can be true. So, keep going. But don't confuse persistence with repeating the same thing forever. Ask for feedback. Learn. Adjust. Improve what needs improving. Take another route when the old one isn't working. Rest when you're exhausted. Then continue. And pray. Not because faith guarantees you'll get the next job. It doesn't. But because there will always be parts of this journey you cannot control. Faith is not passivity. You do what is in your hands to do, and you trust God with what isn't. I couldn't see what people were saying after I left those interview rooms. I couldn't control who chose me. I couldn't know which opportunity would eventually become mine. But I could keep moving, keep learning, keep praying, and keep trusting God. Eventually, I got my yes. But the most important thing didn't happen when that phone rang. It happened earlier. It happened when I stopped asking rejection to tell me who I was. The offer came later. My perspective changed first. So if you're still waiting for your opportunity, remember this. You don't know what was said after you left the room. You don't know whether you were second out of 200. You don't know which opportunity will eventually fit. And you don't know what God may be doing through a season you currently wish would just end. Learn from every no. Change what needs changing. Keep preparing. Keep showing up. Keep praying. But don't turn somebody else's decision into a definition of you. And don't let another person's good news convince you that God has forgotten yours. Sometimes the door you keep asking God to open isn't the door He will use. Sometimes rejection isn't the end of your story. Sometimes it's simply the part of the story where you haven't reached the yes yet. Do what is in your hands to do. Trust God with what isn't, and keep going. Your story is still being written.